Javier Milei has been president of Argentina for 1 year. He promised shock therapy to save the economy from collapse, cut government spending in half, fired 50,000 public employees, eliminated 12 ministries, devalued the peso 54% in 1 day. And the results? Inflation down from 211% to 54%, but poverty up to 57% of the population. This is the most radical economic experiment of the century, and nobody knows if it's working or if it's destroying the country. Right now, Argentina is living through economic transformation unlike anything in modern democratic history. Milei, a libertarian economist who campaigned with a chainsaw promising to cut the state, is actually doing it. Government spending dropped by 30% in real terms. The fiscal deficit went from -5% of GDP to positive surplus in 10 months, fastest fiscal adjustment in recorded history. The Argentine Statistics Agency published data in December 2024 showing monthly inflation at 2.4%, down from 25% when Milei took office. Annual inflation dropped from 211% to 54%. That's a dramatic improvement, but at what cost? The same agency shows poverty rising from 42% to 57%, 8 million more Argentines below the poverty line. This transformation happened precisely when Milei implemented every libertarian economic theory simultaneously with zero gradualism. The probability of this succeeding without massive social cost was always zero. The question is whether the pain is temporary and necessary or permanent and catastrophic. This is the pattern of every shock therapy program in history. Poland in 1990, Russia in 1992, Bolivia in 1985. Rapid, brutal economic adjustment, short-term devastation. Some recovered and became success stories. Others collapsed into chaos. Argentina is writing its chapter now. Domingo Cavallo, former Argentine finance minister who implemented the convertibility plan in the 1990s, stated in November 2024, "Milei is doing what needed to be done, but he's doing it at twice the speed I would recommend. The fiscal adjustment is necessary. The question is whether society can withstand this level of pain without political collapse." Even more striking, Milei has not moderated. Despite protests, despite poverty numbers, despite criticism from every mainstream economist, he's accelerating. Budget cuts for 2025 are larger than 2024. Deregulation is expanding. Privatizations are accelerating. He's betting everything that shock therapy works before political support collapses. The assumption that democratic societies require gradual economic reform broke completely when Argentina elected a president who promised pain and is delivering it at unprecedented speed. Here's what should fascinate and terrify every observer. If Milei succeeds, he proves that radical libertarian economics can save a collapsing country. Every over-indebted, over-regulated nation will face pressure to copy the model. If he fails, it proves that shock therapy in modern democracies is political suicide. The stakes are global, not just Argentine. Think about that. Before we break down exactly what Milei did in year 1, why inflation came down so fast but poverty went up, what the economic data tells us about whether this is working, and whether Argentina can sustain this politically for the 2 or 3 more years needed to see if it works. If you want to understand the most important economic experiment happening in the world right now, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what we're revealing will change how you see government spending, inflation control, and whether radical economic reform is ever justified. Leave a comment. Is Milei saving Argentina or destroying it? Can a democracy sustain this level of economic pain? And should other countries copy this model? Let's start with what Milei actually did because the list of actions is staggering. Day 1, December 10th, 2023. Milei takes office. Day 2, he devalues the peso from 400 per dollar to 800, 54% devaluation overnight. Instant inflation shock, but immediate correction of overvalued currency that was destroying exports. Week 1, announces elimination of 12 ministries: tourism, culture, environment, women and gender, education, labor, social development, public works, health, transport, science and technology, and agriculture, all eliminated or merged into larger departments. Half the cabinet gone. Month 1, freezes all new public sector hiring, begins process to fire 50,000 public employees, eliminates subsidies for energy and transportation. Gasoline and electricity prices jump 40 to 60%. Month 2, sends omnibus bill to Congress with 600 economic reforms. deregulation of most industries, elimination of rent controls, reduction of labor protections, privatization of state companies. Congress blocked most of it initially, but later passed watered-down version. Month 3. Achieves first fiscal surplus in over a decade. Government spending down, revenue stable, deficit eliminated. Markets respond positively. Country risk premium falls. Bond prices rise. Month 4. Inflation starts moderating. 25% monthly becomes 15%, then 10%, then 5%. By month 10, 2 to 3% monthly. Still high but approaching normal levels. Month 6. Announces plans to dollarize or eliminate central bank. Hasn't implemented yet but signals intent. Peso stabilizes in anticipation. Month 9. Poverty hits 57%, highest in 20 years. Protests intensify, but Milei's approval rating holds at 45%. Enough to govern, not enough to be comfortable. Month 12. Year-end results. Inflation down from 211 to 54%. Fiscal deficit eliminated. Reserves increasing, but economy contracted 4%. Poverty up from 42 to 57%. Real wages down 15%. This is the most comprehensive economic transformation in 1 year by any democratic government in modern history. For comparison, Thatcher's reforms in UK took a decade. Reagan's took 8 years. Milei is doing it in 12 months. Now let's talk about why inflation came down so fast, because this is the success story that Milei supporters point to. Inflation in Argentina was driven by fiscal deficit, financed by money printing. Government spent more than it collected in taxes. Difference was printed by central bank. More pesos in circulation. Prices rise. Classic monetary inflation. Milei eliminated the fiscal deficit immediately. Cut spending by 30%. Government no longer needs to print money to finance operations. Money supply growth stopped. Inflation started falling. The mechanism is textbook monetarism, Milton Friedman's theory. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Reduce money supply growth, inflation falls. Milei implemented this perfectly. He also eliminated price controls. Previous governments tried to control inflation by capping prices. This created shortages and black markets. Milei removed all controls. Let prices adjust to market levels. Short-term spike, then stabilization. Energy subsidies were massive distortion. Government paid 80% of true cost of electricity and gas. This encouraged waste and destroyed public finances. Milei cut subsidies. Prices jumped, but consumption fell and fiscal burden disappeared. Peso devaluation was one-time adjustment. Overvalued peso at 400 per dollar was fiction maintained by capital controls. Real market rate was 800. Milei accepted reality, devalued once, then stopped intervening. Peso found natural level around 1,200 and stabilized. The result is inflation fell from 25% monthly to 2 to 3%. That's incredible success by any standard. Argentina went from hyperinflation territory to almost normal inflation in 10 months. Critics argue inflation would have fallen anyway. Previous government was already tightening. True to some extent, but Milei accelerated the process dramatically. And more importantly, he eliminated the fiscal deficit that would have reignited inflation. Now let's talk about why poverty went up, because this is the cost that makes people question the entire approach. Poverty in Argentina is measured by household income relative to cost of basic basket of goods. When real incomes fall or prices of essentials rise, poverty increases. Both happened simultaneously under Milei. Real wages fell 15% as inflation outpaced wage increases in first 6 months. Government employees who kept jobs saw salaries frozen while prices jumped. Private sector wages adjusted slowly. Subsidies elimination hit poor hardest. When electricity and gas bills triple, families living on edge can't absorb the cost. They cut food consumption, pull kids from school to work, move to cheaper housing, fall into poverty. Unemployment rose from 6% to 8%. Government layoffs plus private sector contraction put 200,000 people out of work. No income means poverty. Informal economy contracts. When government spending falls, small businesses dependent on government contracts close. Street vendors lose customers as purchasing power falls. Informal workers, who were already vulnerable, get pushed into extreme poverty. Social spending cuts reduced assistance. Food programs, housing assistance, healthcare, all cut to reduce deficit. People who depended on these programs fell into poverty or deeper poverty. The result is poverty rose from 42% to 57%. That's 15 percentage points, 8 million people, in 1 year. This is devastating human cost. Milei's argument is this: poverty increase is temporary. Painful adjustment necessary to create conditions for sustainable growth. Lower inflation, fiscal stability, competitive currency. These create foundation for job creation and rising wages. Critics argue you're destroying people's lives with theory. 8 million people in poverty, children going hungry. That's not abstract statistic. That's moral catastrophe. The debate comes down to time horizon. If poverty falls back to 40% within 2 years as economy recovers, Milei was right. If poverty stays at 57% or rises further, he was wrong and caused immense suffering for nothing. Now let's talk about the economic data beyond inflation and poverty, because there are other indicators of success or failure. GDP contracted 4% in 2024. That's recession, but not as bad as feared. Many predicted 8 to 10% contraction, and monthly data shows contraction bottomed in mid-2024 and is now stabilizing. Q4 2024 was flat. Q1 2025 might show slight growth. Foreign reserves increased from negative to $20 billion. Central bank was insolvent. Now has buffer. This is critical for stability and shows confidence returning. Country risk premium fell from 3,000 basis points to 1,000. Still high, but massive improvement. Argentina can borrow internationally again at expensive but not prohibitive rates. Exports increased 8%. Competitive peso makes Argentine products cheaper internationally. Agriculture, mining, energy, all growing. This brings dollars into economy. Investment remains weak. Foreign direct investment up slightly, but domestic investment down. Businesses are waiting to see if stability holds before committing capital. Unemployment rose, but less than expected. 8% is painful, but given 4% GDP contraction, could have been worse. Labor market showing some resilience. Real wages down 15%, but starting to recover. Last 3 months of 2024 showed wage growth outpacing inflation. If this continues, real wages could return to pre-Milei levels by end of 2025. Banking system deposits increasing. People are bringing money back into formal system as confidence returns. This is positive sign. The data is mixed. Some indicators improving, others still bad. But trajectory is generally positive if you believe short-term pain is acceptable for long-term gain. Now let's talk about the political sustainability, because economics aside, can Milei hold power long enough to see if this works? His approval rating is 45%, down from 55% when he took office, but stabilizing. Enough to govern, but not comfortable margin. Opposition is fragmented. Peronists, the traditional left-wing party, are divided. Union-backed faction wants to fight Milei. Moderate faction wants to negotiate. This division helps Milei. Congress is hostile but not fully blocking. Milei doesn't have majority, but he can negotiate. Passed watered-down reforms, enough to continue program even if not ideal. Provinces are mixed. Some governors support reforms, others resist. But federal control over finances gives Milei leverage. He can cut transfers to uncooperative provinces. Unions are weak. Historically, unions brought down Argentine presidents, general strikes, mass protests, but union membership has declined. Their power is diminished. Strikes happen, but don't paralyze country. Media is divided. Some support Milei, others attack viciously, but he's mastered social media. Direct communication with supporters doesn't need traditional media approval. Next election is 2027, 3 years away. If economy shows clear recovery by 2026, Milei could win re-election or his coalition could maintain power. If poverty is still 57%, he loses badly. The political question is whether Argentine society can sustain 3 years of austerity. Historically, the answer is no. Every shock therapy attempt in Argentina failed politically within 2 years. Milei is betting that eliminating inflation quickly enough creates breathing room to finish the job. Now let's talk about historical parallels, because Argentina has been here before. In 1989, Carlos Menem took office during hyperinflation crisis, implemented market reforms, privatizations, deregulation, fixed peso to dollar. It worked for a decade. Argentina grew strongly in 1990s, then collapsed in 2001-2002. Massive default. Peso devalued. Poverty exploded. Menem's reforms were real but incomplete. Fixed exchange rate without fiscal discipline eventually caused crisis. The question is whether Milei learned from this and is implementing comprehensive enough reforms to avoid repeat. In 1976, military junta implemented shock therapy, opened economy, deregulated, cut spending. It worked economically, inflation fell, growth resumed. But cost was dictatorship. 30,000 disappeared. That's not acceptable model. Milei is attempting democratic shock therapy. The challenge is, no country has successfully done this. Democratic governments that try usually lose elections before reforms have time to work. Or they moderate reforms to stay in power, but then reforms don't achieve objectives. Poland in 1990 is possible model. Balcerowicz plan. Massive shock therapy. Inflation from 200% to 30% in 2 years. But Poland had advantages, Argentina doesn't. EU membership path. Western aid. Geographically close to rich markets. Argentina is isolated and has no major patron. Chile under Pinochet is economically closest parallel. Radical free market reforms. Privatizations. Deregulation. Budget balance. It worked economically. Chile became richest country in Latin America. But again, dictatorship. And even Chile experienced severe recession in 1982-1983, with unemployment hitting 30%. Milei is trying to achieve Chile's economic results with Poland's democratic process in Argentina's difficult context. Nobody has done this before. Now let's talk about what happens next, because the trajectory matters more than current status. Best case scenario, inflation continues falling to 20 to 30% by end of 2025. Economy grows 2 to 3% in 2025. Poverty starts declining in second half of 2025 as real wages recover. By 2026, clear recovery is evident. Poverty back to 45%, growth at 4%, inflation under 20%. Milei wins re-election or coalition continues. Reforms consolidate. Argentina becomes success story. This requires everything going right. No external shocks, social patience holding, reforms implemented fully. It's possible but requires luck and skill. Moderate scenario. Inflation stabilizes at 40 to 50%. Can't get lower without further painful measures. Economy grows slightly in 2025, 1%. Poverty remains high. 45% approval becomes 40%. Milei loses 2027 election. Next government partially reverses reforms. Argentina returns to muddling through. Not catastrophe, but not success. This is most likely outcome. Partial reform, partial recovery, political backlash prevents completion. Worst case scenario, inflation stops falling or resurges due to external shock or loss of confidence. Economy contracts again in 2025. Poverty rises to 60%. Social unrest intensifies. Milei forced to resign or loses emergency election. Populist government returns, reverses all reforms. Argentina back to square one or worse. This is less likely but not impossible. External shock like global recession or commodity price collapse could trigger this. The next 6 months are critical. If economic data continues improving, Milei's bet pays off. If data deteriorates, political support collapses. Now let's address the ideological question. Because Milei is explicit libertarian, and this colors everything. He calls himself anarcho-capitalist, believes government should be minimal, markets should be free, individual liberty is paramount. He's implementing this ideology in real time. For libertarians globally, Milei is test case. If he succeeds, it validates their worldview. Government is the problem. Cutting it dramatically improves outcomes. They're desperate for him to succeed. For progressives, Milei is nightmare. Cutting social spending, deregulating, privatizing, accepting massive poverty increase as necessary cost. They're certain he'll fail and point to suffering as proof libertarianism is cruel. The honest assessment requires separating ideology from pragmatic evaluation. Did inflation fall? Yes. Did poverty rise? Yes. Will economy recover? Unknown. Is the trade-off worth it? Value judgment. If you believe inflation at 211% would have destroyed Argentina completely and mass poverty was inevitable regardless, then Milei's approach is justified. Rip the band-aid off. Fast pain better than slow death. If you believe gradual reform with more social protection would have achieved similar inflation reduction with less poverty increase, then Milei's approach is unnecessarily cruel. You can fight inflation without starving 8 million people. The data will eventually tell us which view is correct, but it will take 3 to 5 years. Until then, it's ideological debate with real people suffering. Now let's talk about international reaction because the world is watching. IMF supports Milei cautiously. They provided $44 billion in 2018 under Macri. Milei is implementing exactly what IMF recommends: fiscal discipline, market liberalization, subsidy elimination. IMF approved $48 billion program in 2024. United States supports Milei strongly. He's pro-US, pro-Israel, anti-China, aligns with American foreign policy. Trump administration particularly enthusiastic. They see him as model for others. China is wary. Milei campaigned against China, called them communists, threatened to cut ties, but he moderated after election. China is major trade partner. Argentina needs their market. Relationship is pragmatic. Brazil is hostile. Lula's government despises Milei. Ideologically opposite, but trade continues. Argentina needs Brazil. Brazil needs Argentina. Personal animosity doesn't stop commerce. European economists are skeptical. They've seen shock therapy fail before. Concerned about social cost, but impressed by fiscal discipline. Cautiously supportive. Other Latin American countries are watching closely. Ecuador, Peru, Chile, all have economic problems. If Milei succeeds, pressure to copy. If fails, reinforces gradualist approach. The global significance is Argentina is laboratory for whether radical libertarian economics works in practice. Theory is being tested. Results will influence policy debates globally. If this breakdown of what Milei did in year one, why inflation fell but poverty rose, what the data shows about success or failure, and whether Argentina can sustain this politically for long enough to know if it works, changed how you see shock therapy economics and democratic reform, hit that like button and subscribe. We're tracking every month of Argentina's experiment, every indicator of success or failure, every sign of whether radical economics can save a collapsing country. Leave a comment. Is Milei saving Argentina or destroying it? Can democracy sustain this level of pain? Should other countries copy this model? Share this with anyone interested in economic policy, libertarian theory, or anyone who thinks government spending is always bad or always good. After this, they'll understand why Argentina is the most important economic experiment of the decade and why the answer matters far beyond Buenos Aires.